The wind howled across the upper ridges of Virek's spine, tugging at the frayed cloak wrapped around the old human shoulders. Snow drifted through the alien evergreens, dark violet, their crystalline needles whispering secrets in the cold. The peaks stretched endlessly, broken only by the ancient monastery built into the mountainside, a place forgotten by most and deliberately erased by some. Few remember its name. Fewer still dared approach it. But the human had come. He leaned on a twisted walking staff made from black wood, his breath steaming in the frigid air. His name was Ezra Holt, once Captain Ezra Holt of the Interstellar Earthbound Reconnaissance Corps, now just the old man to anyone who still cared to name him. His spine curved slightly, and the metallic whir of augmented knees echoed quietly with each step. His left eye, cybernetic and flickering faint green, scanned the ridge for signs of movement. Not that he expected company. Not up here. Not anymore. The wind shifted again, and Ezra paused. Beneath the howl of the elements, there was something else, barely perceptible. A scraping, a chitter, then a low, almost harmonic growl, too delicate for a predator, but too intentional for random wildlife. He sniffed the air. "Little ones," he murmured. The mountain whispered back nothing. Ezra resumed walking, his boots crunching the snow with familiar rhythm. He was old, not by Terran standards. Earth medtech had pushed life expectancy past 130 before he'd retired, but by universal standards. Aliens always assumed humans burned fast and bright. Few expected an old one to outlive an entire star empire's memory. He reached the edge of the monastery gate, a fractured arch half buried in snow. Dragonstone, if memory served. A mineral laced with dormant bioessence, once used by the old Drakari order. The monastery had been theirs back before the Empire fell, back before Ezra had burned half their sky. A claw scratch marred the stone. Not fresh, not old either. Maybe days, maybe hours. He stepped through the arch. The courtyard beyond was as he remembered it, choked with snow, the statues of winged sentinels shattered by time and artillery. The wide stone plaza curved around a broken fountain, now frozen solid. Ezra knelt beside it, letting his gloved fingers brush the frost-covered basin. His mechanical hand buzzed faintly. There were dragontail berries growing near the base, out of season. That meant something nearby, still breath heat. Still remembered. He stood slowly. The memory hit him again, a roar that split the atmosphere, fire across the sky, the final push through the heart of Drakari Command. A war that ended with treaties, yes, but at the price of countless lives. Ezra had led the charge, and the Drakari had never forgiven humans for their victory, nor themselves for their pride. But he wasn't here for penance. Not exactly. Ezra took a slow breath and pulled something from inside his coat. A silver disc the size of a coin, etched with ancient runes that shimmered faintly. He pressed it into the fountain's rim. It sank in with a soft click. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a pulse, deep, low, a heartbeat of power, rippled through the stone. The ground trembled, just enough to dust snow from a nearby statue's snout. And then, movement. They emerged not with violence, but with curiosity. For small heads peered over the ruined wall on the far side of the courtyard. Slit-pupil eyes blinked in unison. Tiny claws scrabbled for purchase. The first one leapt down, wings flaring awkwardly, landing in a puff of powder. Ezra didn't move. A second followed, then the third, then the fourth. Dragon cubs. They couldn't have been more than a few years old. Their horns barely formed, their scales a patchwork of dull gold, mossy green, and ember red. They had the raw-boned awkwardness of younglings and the cautious grace of apex predators. They surrounded him silently. Ezra looked at each of them with his one remaining organic eye. "I suppose you're wondering why I'm here." The largest cub growled, not a threat, but a question. Ezra reached into his coat again, slowly. The cubs watched every movement. He drew out a cloth-wrapped object and unrolled it carefully. Inside lay a cracked pendant of obsidian, its edges burned, its chain fused. The crest engraved on its surface was unmistakable, A stylized dragon curled around Star. Drakari royal house. One of the cubs hissed. Ezra looked at them. This belonged to your mother. They froze. Ezra's voice softened. She was a warrior, a queen, and in the end, a friend. The wind didn't howl now. It waited. I was there when she fell, he continued. I held her head in my lap while the fortress crumbled. She made me promise, swear it, in her dying breath, that if any of her children survived, I would find them, keep them safe. The red-scaled cub took a step forward. Its eyes glistened. Ezra reached out, slowly, gently, and set the pendant down on the stone. She died for peace. For you. And I'm here to keep my word. Silence. Then, a soft rumble rolled from one of the cubs. A vibration through the earth, not hostile, but confused, uncertain. Then they all turned. Ezra's brows furrowed. What is it? The cubs looked toward the shadows beneath the monastery's broken columns. There, hidden in the darkness, another shape loomed. Larger, older, a full-grown dragon, wounded, emaciated, yet unmistakably noble, stepped into the fading light. Ezra's breath caught. You can't be. She had one horn cracked, a wing dragging slightly, but her eyes, brilliant violet, scarred and ancient, locked onto him with memory. Captain Holt, she said. Her voice was hoarse, beautiful, terrifying. Ezra took a single step back, not out of fear but awe. Sarinthra, the dragon queen, once thought dead in the final siege of Maelkar's Peak, lowered her head slightly. You kept your promise, she said. Ezra swallowed. I did. The cubs turned from him to her, confusion on their young faces. They didn't know. They hadn't been told. Sarinthra looked at them, then back at him. You were not supposed to return, she said. Not to this place. Not to them. I know, he said, but someone has to protect what's left. The old alliances are stirring again. They'll come for them. Sarinthra's nostrils flared. Then we make them fear us again. A gust of wind tore through the monastery, and the air shimmered briefly, an illusion dropping. Dozens of small shapes emerged from the shadows around the courtyard. More cubs. Hidden survivors. Ezra's jaw tightened. You've been raising them. I've been waiting, she said, for the one human I trusted. The one my sister called brother. The only one who didn't burn. The snow hissed as her breath heated the air between them. Ezra took another step forward. Then let's finish what we started. Her eyes narrowed. Are you ready to fight again, old man? Ezra gave a tired smile. Only if they deserve it. The cubs closed in around him again, but this time not in hostility. This time they bowed. And deep in the mountains of Virek's spine, where dragons once ruled and humans once conquered, something ancient stirred again. Ezra looked up. The stars were changing. The stone chambers beneath the monastery were warmer than the snow-laced courtyard above. Bioluminescent moss climbed the ancient walls, casting green-blue hues that shimmered on cracked murals and worn relics. The underground sanctum had once been a place of worship, of strategy, and of birth. Now, it had become something else entirely. A haven, a nursery, a war room. Ezra sat on a low obsidian bench, his cybernetic knee whirring softly as he adjusted his position. The cubs, over 24 of them now, were scattered around the chamber. Some were curled together in nests of woven foliage and warm stone. Others wrestled with playful growls that echoed across the vaulted space. But the red one, the first he had seen, remained by his side. It hadn't left him since Sarinthra's reappearance. He called her Ember. She had a scar across her snout and eyes that were far too knowing for her age. Sarinthra stood across the room, her full size coiled with regal control. She had let the illusion drop completely now. No hiding, no more waiting. She was thinner, yes, her scales duller, but the fire in her core had not dimmed. Ezra broke the silence. Why didn't you tell them who you were? Sarinthra's tail flicked. Because names mean less than actions. They need to learn who I am from what I do, not what they've heard. She turned one eye toward him. The galaxy erased the Drakari. It wrote us off as extinct. That was useful for a time. And now extinction is no longer a shield. It's a target. Ezra exhaled through his teeth. He remembered the brief he'd intercepted 2 months ago. A fragment of military chatter from the Navari Syndicate, one of the remaining power blocks from the Outer Ring. They had spoken of Phase Ember, a cleansing operation targeting suspected remnants of the Drakari bloodlines. They thought the dragons were fractured, dying, vulnerable. They weren't entirely wrong. Ezra leaned forward. They're coming, Sirin. The Navari know you're alive, or at least they suspect it. Your hatchlings aren't just a secret anymore. They're an excuse for war. The Queen nodded slowly. Then we must move before they do. Ezra raised a brow. Move? You plan to flee? Her jaw tightened. To strike. He blinked. With what? A handful of cubs and a wounded queen. They are not just cubs, she said quietly. They are heirs. They are born of flame and memory. You think them weak because they are young. But age does not define fury. Ezra stood, his voice rising. Fury is not a strategy. I've seen too many battles start that way and end in ash. Silence fell. Ember pressed against his leg, sensing the tension. Sarinthara's gaze didn't waver. Then what do you propose, Captain Holt? He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We don't just need to survive. We need allies. Someone who still believes in the old accords. Sarinthara narrowed her eyes. There are none left. There's one. She blinked slowly. Who? Ezra turned toward a faded mural, once vibrant, now nearly lost to erosion. It showed a three-headed dragon alongside a bipedal figure wreathed in starlight. Old mythology, but there was truth in it. A girl named Lyra Ven. Half human, half Shandari. She commands the last neutral fleet in the inner rings. If we can reach her, Sarinthara's nostrils flared. You're chasing myths. She owes me, Ezra replied. Enough to risk a war? He looked her dead in the eye. I once pulled her mother out of a collapsing moon. She'll listen. Silence reigned again. Then the Queen spoke. If this Lyra is real, then find her. I'll need a ship. Sarinthara stepped aside, revealing a hidden path leading deeper into the sanctum. Then come see what I've hidden. The vault was unlike anything Ezra expected. Half buried under rubble, protected by stone and enchantment alike, lay an ancient Drakari skycrawler, sleek, angular, and pulsing faintly with life. Its hull shimmered in violet light, still marked with the sigils of the old royal house. Not just a warship. This was a command vessel. A legend. You kept it, Ezra whispered. It refused to die, Sarinthara replied. Like you. Ezra stepped forward. The ship recognized his genetic imprint. He had piloted Drakari vessels during the final days of the war. The console lights flickered on as he approached. You'll need a crew, Sarinthara said. I'll take Ember. The red cub perked up, eyes widening. She's not ready, Sarinthara said firmly. She's exactly who I need, and she knows how to listen. The Queen hesitated, then slowly nodded. Then she goes with you. But if she dies, I'll die first. They shook no hands, signed no oaths. But the pact was made. Ezra powered up the ship that night. It groaned, as if waking from a long, reluctant slumber. Ember curled near the navigation core, her tail twitching with excitement. She'd never left the mountain. Everything was new, dangerous, beautiful. As the vessel lifted into the storm-lit skies of Vyrek, Ezra felt something in his chest shift. Not fear, not hope, something older. He set coordinates for the drift corridors, routes through subspace still known only to surviving veterans and smugglers. If he could slip past the Syndicate's forward patrols, they'd reach Lyra's sector in 2 days. He hoped. 12 hours into the journey, Ember began growling low in her throat. Ezra was mid-recalibration on the comms array when she padded to the viewport. What is it, kid? He asked, checking the scans. You smell something? Her growl grew louder. The ship shuddered. Then the alarms began to wail. Ezra whipped his head toward the console. No. Syndicate interdiction field. A gravitational snare, flung like a net into the corridor's mouth. They were caught. The ship spiraled once, then slowed, forcefully yanked into real space. Outside the viewport, a sleek black cruiser loomed. Its hull was painted with the blood-red spiral of the Navari Syndicate, and on its front nose cone, like a grotesque trophy, was the mounted skull of a juvenile dragon. Ezra's jaw clenched. A voice crackled across the comms. Unregistered vessel. You are now under Syndicate jurisdiction. Power down and prepare for boarding. Any attempt to resist will result in immediate termination. He turned to Ember. Stay behind me. She didn't. He grabbed his pulse rifle, even as his old bones ached. Ember snarled, crouching low. Her eyes burned like coals. They were about to be boarded. But the real threat wasn't the boarding party. The real threat was what Ezra saw on the sensor panel seconds later, just behind the cruiser. Another signal. Unknown transponder. No IFF. And it was moving fast. Too fast. Ezra's eyes widened. That's not a Syndicate ship. Outside, in the void, the space between stars bent unnaturally, like light was being eaten. The boarding cruiser began to fire warning shots, and the unknown signal didn't slow. Ember roared, as if recognizing something Ezra couldn't. The unknown vessel collided with the cruiser, and everything outside the viewport went white. Ezra shielded Ember as the shockwave rocked their ship, and then the boarding alarms cut out. Silence. Only static on the comms. Ezra reached toward the screen again, hand trembling. A new signal appeared. Text only. Hello, old man. It's been a while. Ezra's mouth went dry. Impossible. He knew that call sign, and the person who used it had been dead for 15 years. The light outside the viewport flickered and dimmed, revealing the carnage left in the unknown vessel's wake. The Syndicate cruiser had been split in half, its armored hull now floating debris, leaking frozen oxygen and fragments of bodies into the void. The dragon skull that once adorned its prow now drifted in slow, dishonored spin. Ezra sat frozen at the helm. His hand hovered over the comms array, staring at the transmission still pulsing across the screen. Hello, old man. It's been a while. The voice had not been transmitted vocally, just the text, but it didn't need a voice. That call sign, it belonged to someone who'd once been family. Kara Holt, his daughter, dead 15 years, or so he had believed. Ezra's voice cracked. No, that can't be right. You died. I saw the wreckage. Ember nudged his leg. Her eyes narrowed. The ship was still. The threat was gone. But something in the air, some ancient thread of fate, had been pulled taut again. Another transmission blinked onto the screen. Tethering to you now. Don't shoot. Not yet. Ezra reached slowly to activate manual override, his fingers twitching. His heart pounded, an ancient war drum he hadn't heard since the final siege. The unknown ship was small, barely larger than an escort shuttle. It rotated smoothly, non-aggressively, before locking in a position on their starboard docking ring. It bore no markings, no official codes, just a single, painted sigil on the hull. A silver dragon's eye. Ezra blinked. That was Kara's old emblem before she left the Corps. The docking clamp hissed. A loading cycle engaged. Airlock pressurizing. Ezra stood slowly, rifle in hand. Ember growled but stayed close, every scale on her back raised. He looked down at her. If this goes wrong, you run. Hide in the engine shaft. Wait until it's clear. She didn't move. He sighed. Didn't think you would. The inner airlock hissed open, and there she stood, alive. Kara Holt. Her armor was a fusion of human and alien tech, sleek, jagged, and reinforced with Drakari plating. Her once short black hair had grown longer, streaked with silver. An eye patch covered her right eye, and a faint scar bisected her cheek. But her face, gods, her face, Ezra would know it anywhere. Kara stepped into the ship, pulse rifle lowered. Her other hand raised, empty. Her voice was calm. Hi, Dad. Ezra didn't speak. Not yet. She nodded once at Ember. Cute pet. Ezra finally found his voice. Where the hell have you been? Kara looked tired. Long story. You were declared dead. I was. Ezra lowered his rifle. Barely. Talk. Kara moved slowly, settling into the co-pilot's seat like she had years ago. After the fall of Zareth Station, I didn't die. My ship was hit. Yes, but I ejected before detonation. I was picked up by them. Ezra stiffened. Them. She turned to look at him. The Forgebound. Ezra's blood ran cold. The Forgebound were a myth. A rogue network of post-human AIs, exiled scientists, and lost soldiers who had vanished into deep space after the Treaty of Orion. Said to be building something out there. Said to be watching everything. Ezra spoke slowly. That's ghost talk, Kara. Nursery rhymes for paranoid captains. She reached into her jacket and tossed something onto the console. It clanked, a solid metal key with shifting gears embedded in the center. The sigil of the Forgebound. I became one of them, she said. For a time. Ezra stared. Why? They saved me. Rebuilt me. Gave me answers you couldn't. And they've been watching the galaxy rot ever since. Ember sniffed the key, then recoiled. They know about the Cubs, Kara added. They knew about the Queen. Ezra's jaw clenched. Then why did they let the Syndicate come so close? Kara's expression hardened. Because the Forgebound were infiltrated. Ezra's mind raced. What? She nodded. About a year ago, something changed. We found records being erased from Central Archives. Biological experiments being conducted on captured dragons. Forbidden tech. Forgebound tech. Ezra narrowed his eyes. You're saying the Syndicate got their hands on Forgebound intelligence. Or someone inside gave it to them. Kara leaned closer. Dad, this isn't about Syndicate greed. Someone is engineering a purge. Ezra shook his head. To what end? To trigger the Second Flame War, Kara whispered. To finish what the old war couldn't. Erase the Drakari legacy permanently. And erase you. He stared at her. Me? You're the last sanctioned, war-bonded human. You commanded dragons in the field. Your neural pattern is still registered in Drakari battle mind arrays. If you're alive and training new cubs, then the threat of a human-Drakari alliance still exists. Ezra sat back, stunned. Someone's afraid of the past. They should be, Kara said, her voice low. Because the past is coming back. Ezra looked at her. So what now? Kara leaned forward. We get to Lyra Ven. Now, before the Syndicate wipes her too. He paused. You know where she is? Kara smirked. I'm the one who told you she'd help. Ezra blinked. That was you? The leak. I couldn't approach you directly. Too risky. You be traced. Ezra exhaled. And now, the Syndicate knows you're alive, the Forgebound are compromised, and the Cubs are exposed. They both turned toward Ember, who crouched protectively over the navigation console. Ezra rose. Then we don't wait. The ship dropped back into the corridor, faster now, fueled by Kara's hybrid core. The path to Lyra Ven's last known coordinates was turbulent, twisting through artificial wormholes and cosmic interference. Ezra and Kara sat in silence for a time. Then, I buried your mother, he said quietly. Kara didn't look at him. I know. I watched the footage. He looked at her. I would have come for you. I tried. She nodded once. I know. But the silence that followed was heavier. 12 hours later, they exited into the mainland drift. Lyra's territory, or what was left of it. The stars were gone. The planet they had marked for arrival, Salus Prime, was cracked in half. Not bombed. Not shattered. Excavated. Ezra blinked in horror. They cored it. Massive mining beams had ripped through the crust, pulling the planet's heart into a massive forge station now orbiting where the planet had been. Floating around it, wreckage, bodies, ships, and something else. Kara whispered, That's not Syndicate tech. The forge station pulsed with artificial gravity and fire. And then, on its central tower, something blinked. A massive holographic sigil. A spiral of bone and steel, crowned with a dragon's eye. Ezra leaned closer. That's... Kara's breath caught. The eye of reclamation. Ezra stood slowly, voice trembling. That was extinct. Kara's voice went flat. No, they survived. Ezra turned to her. Who? Kara stared at the forge station. The Ashborn. Ezra's legs nearly gave out. That's impossible. They were wiped out. Every last one of them. Kara whispered, We missed something. They've been hiding inside the Syndicate. Inside the Forgebound. Growing. The comms buzzed. A new signal. No words. Just one image. A dragon cub. Ember's age. Chained to a metal cross. And below it, the text. Send US the old man. Or we burn the rest. Ezra stood at the center of the command deck, his eyes locked on the transmission, on the image of the chained dragon cub suspended before the pulsing forge station. Its wings were half-formed, its golden scales charred and bloody. The text remained frozen below it. Send US the old man, or we burn the rest. The message had been delivered through open comms. Anyone listening in the drift could have seen it. A warning, a trap, a declaration of war. Kara slammed her fist against the console. They know who you are. They know what you did during the war. Ezra didn't answer. Ember curled at his feet, her scales twitching, her eyes on the image of the cub. She let out a soft, high-pitched sound, like a whimper trying to become a growl. It broke something in Ezra. They want me, he said flatly. Yes, Kara said, because you're the last symbol of the human Drakari alliance. Killing you breaks the myth, destroys the hope. Or, Ezra said, it could prove it still has teeth. He turned slowly toward Kara. Can you get me onto that station? Kara frowned. You're not seriously thinking of... Yes, he cut in. She looked at him like he was mad. You'll be walking into a nest of augmented war priests, fire weavers, and exotanks. The Ashborn don't just execute. They ritualize. They'll make your death into theater. I'm counting on it, Ezra said, voice grim. Ember stood. She nudged his arm, her scales humming faintly. Her gaze was filled with something raw. Not fear. Conviction. She wants to go, Kara said. Ezra shook his head. No, I can't bring her into that. Kara crossed her arms. You're not leaving me behind either. He looked at her. You want to fight this war again? He asked. The real one this time? Not memory. Not shadow. Flesh and flame. I'm already in it, she said. And besides, she flicked a control, revealing a small chamber opening on the lower deck. Inside, for more cubs. Older than Ember. Their eyes glowed like dying suns. Their scales shimmered with battle bond runes. I didn't come alone. Ezra stared at the cubs. Where did you get them? Rescued from an Ashborn processing colony 2 years ago. They've been training with me ever since. He looked at the cubs, then Ember, then Kara, and nodded. Then let's go. The ship approached the forge station slowly, broadcasting a singular signal. Surrendering target. Unarmed. The ruse didn't hold long. 2 Ashborn cruisers approached, scanning the vessel. One of them hailed. Approach vector locked. Prepare for boarding. Kara muttered, just like last time. Ezra didn't ask what she meant. The docking clamps slammed into place with a screeching clang. The main corridor flooded with white blue light. The boarding ramp opened. Ezra stepped forward first. He wore no armor, only his old recon corps jacket and a memory drive wired into the back of his neck. His cybernetic eye glowed faint green. Ember padded beside him, tail curled low. Kara flanked them, the other cubs hidden behind cloaking fields. 2 Ashborn warriors met them. They weren't fully human anymore. Their bodies were sheathed in gleaming black armor that pulsed like skin. Their faces were masks of bone and metal. You have come, one rasped. The betrayer of Drakari. The butcher of the peak. Ezra didn't respond. They led him down a narrow, jagged corridor pulsing with industrial light. The air stank of coolant, blood, and burned crystal. Screams echoed faintly in the distance. Ritual, not suffering. The Ashborn never wasted pain. The inner sanctum was a cathedral of fire and metal. Dragons, dead and dying, hung from chains like grotesque chandeliers. Their essence was being drained into fuel cores. At the center, atop a throne of melted Drakari relics, sat the high pyromancer of the Ashborn. He was enormous, more machine than man, with 6 arms for eyes and an aura of heat so intense the walls behind him shimmered like desert mirages. His voice hit like thunder. You came. Ezra stood firm. I did. The pyromancer's laughter rattled the metal beneath their feet. Foolish. Brave. Human. He lifted one massive hand, and the chain cub from the transmission was lowered into view, still alive, barely. Ezra's voice was like a blade. Let him go. You will die first, the pyromancer roared. Then your bloodline. Then the last of the flame. Ember snarled. The pyromancer's eyes turned toward her. And the cub shall be bled to feed the void. Ezra pressed a button on the back of his neck. A pulse of light exploded from his spine, igniting ancient battle bond protocols embedded in his nervous system. The memory drive activated. Dragon runes awakened. And all around the room, hidden in vents, shadows, rafters, the other cubs struck. They weren't just survivors. They were assassins. With screams that echoed like stormfire, the cubs fell upon the Ashborn guards. Flame met steel. Claws ripped through armor. Kara burst from the shadows behind the pyromancer's throne, two plasma blades spinning in her hands. Chaos erupted. Ezra moved like a man reborn, slamming his staff into one Ashborn's throat, tearing out the control core from another. Ember leapt into the air, spinning and landing square on the high altar, spitting fire. The pyromancer rose, roaring. His arms spun, forming a burning crucible of energy. "You think this changes fate?" he bellowed. "You cannot kill what is already fire." Ezra roared back. "You don't understand fire." He dove forward, jamming his memory drive into the altar's base. The ancient Drakari bond stream activated, linked through Ember and the other cubs. Suddenly, the entire station shuddered. The forge's energy turned red. Kara screamed, "Dad, you're overloading it." "I know," he shouted. "Get the cubs out." The pyromancer staggered, clutching his core. No, you can't." Ezra looked him dead in the eye. "I can, and I will." He tore the core from the altar. The explosion tore through the forge station like a sun being born. In orbit, Kara's secondary ship picked up the emergency signal. She looked through the viewport as the forge station split apart, sending fragments spiraling into the drift. She screamed into the comms. "Ezra, do you copy? Ember, anyone?" There was only static. Then, a faint, broken signal. "Get out." Kara turned to the pilot cubs. "We're going back. You'll never make it through the debris field," one warned. "I don't care," she growled. "He's not gone. Not yet." Inside the fractured heart of the station, surrounded by fire and broken metal, Ezra opened one eye. Ember lay beside him, her body shielding his. They were alive. Barely. He smiled through blood and smoke. "Good girl." Then everything around them began to collapse. Above them, a hatch blew open, and Kara dropped through with two dragons in tow. "Dad!" she screamed, pulling him up. Ezra coughed. "You're late." "You're an idiot," she snapped. "Runs in the family." They pulled him into the evac vessel, Ember leaping in behind him. The hatch sealed. The ship fired thrusters, fleeing the dying station as its core imploded. And behind them, the Ashborn's banner burned in silence. The stars felt different now. Ezra stared through the viewport of the medical chamber aboard Kara's evac frigate, watching the remnants of the Ashborn forge station fade into a distant glowing cloud. It drifted like a ghost among the stars, a tomb of hatred, and proof that monsters born from war could be unmade by what they once tried to destroy. He winced slightly as Kara adjusted the stabilizer unit attached to his ribs. "Hold still," she muttered. "I've been holding still for 30 years, Ezra grumbled. "Doesn't mean I enjoy it." "You shouldn't be alive," she snapped. "You say that like it's a bad thing." Kara stepped back, exhaling. "You burned out half your neural cortex. The drive you wired into the altar wasn't made to integrate with human brain tissue. Do you even understand what you did?" "I fried their command link. Severed their access to the Drakari bond streams. The Ashborn can't recreate those dragons anymore. Their ritual bindings are gone." "And nearly took you with it," she said. Ezra gave her a weak grin. "It was worth it." Kara didn't smile back, but she didn't argue either. Ember padded softly into the chamber, her head bowed low, a small gash across her neck already healing. She had refused to leave his side since they were pulled from the wreckage. The other cubs were healing too, tended to by a field medic Kara had trusted since her forge-bound years. "No casualties. Not one." "Come here, girl," Ezra murmured. Ember climbed up beside him, laying her head on his chest. Her breath was warm, slow, steady. "I think she thinks you're hers now," Kara said. "Other way around," Ezra replied. He rested a hand on Ember's hornbrow. She didn't hesitate. "Not once. You saw her." "I saw all of them," Kara said. "And you?" Ezra chuckled softly. "Wasn't sure I still had it in me." "You do." They sat in silence, letting the ship drift toward the rendezvous coordinates Kara had set prior to the assault. Lyra Ven's fleet, if it still existed. Kara finally broke the quiet. So what happens now? Ezra looked at her. We rebuild. And if the Ashborn weren't the only ones? She asked. Ezra's expression turned dark. Then we keep going. Fire's not finished burning. Not yet. Kara sat across from him, removing her armored glove and flexing her fingers. Her hand bore the faint silver tattoos of the Forgebound. Now, incomplete, the connection broken. She wasn't one of them anymore. Not fully. You know, she said slowly, there was a time I hated you. Ezra nodded. You should have. You left me behind. I thought you were dead. Kara didn't respond at first. Then, I used to tell myself that if I ever saw you again, I'd shoot you. Just once. In the leg. Just to be fair. Ezra smirked. So what stopped you? Kara looked at Ember. She did. They both watched the cub sleep. She trusted you without question, Kara said. That's rare. She's rare, Ezra whispered. 3 days later, the stars shifted. Lyra Vin's fleet emerged from cloaking above a dead moon in the Corrin Fringe. It was smaller than Ezra remembered, but sleeker, upgraded, and brimming with hybrid power signatures. The flagship, the Dawnbreaker, approached on a silent vector. Ezra stood on the viewing platform of Kara's frigate, freshly bandaged, leaning heavily on his blackwood staff. Ember sat beside him, now standing nearly chest height, her eyes tracking the ship's every move. Think she'll shoot first? Kara asked, stepping beside him. She's got more sense than that, Ezra replied. The comms crackled. A voice came through, sharp, calm, powerful. Captain Holt, this is Admiral Vin of the Independent Coalition. Your transmission was unexpected. Ezra grinned. I've always been good at those. Permission to dock? You won't need to dock, Lyra replied. I'm coming to you. Kara raised an eyebrow. That was fast. She was listening, Ezra said. They always are. Lyra Vin entered the frigate's hangar with a small honor guard, each bearing insignias of at least 4 major species, including humans, Shandari, and even exiled Krenari. Her skin shimmered with soft iridescence, and her eyes were crystalline, cybernetic replacements that could read a man's pulse from 20 meters away. Ezra stepped forward. Lyra, she smiled faintly. Ezra, you look worse than I imagined. Thanks, he said, coughing. Her gaze turned to Ember, who rose behind him, wings twitching. And is this her? Her name's Ember, and she's not alone. Ezra gestured as the other cubs stepped forward from the shadows. 8 now, each one larger, fiercer, and watching Lyra with a combination of caution and curiosity. Lyra stepped closer. Ember let out a low sound, but not hostile. She's beautiful, Lyra said softly. You raised her? Ezra shook his head. She raised me. Lyra nodded. So what do you want? Ezra looked her in the eye. A sanctuary, training grounds, tech weapons, and ships. Lyra blinked. That's a lot of want. I'll give you more in return. Oh, Ezra stepped back, lifting his hand. Behind him, the cubs flared their wings in unison, scales catching the overhead light. I'll give you the future. Over the next 2 weeks, preparations began. Kara coordinated with Lyra's engineers to refit the Cubs' flight carriers into real battle-ready vessels. Ezra, though injured, supervised bonding rituals and combat drills, merging ancient Drakari discipline with human tactics. The Cubs weren't just growing. They were changing. Smarter, sharper. Some began speaking. Others showed signs of telepathic linking. Ember in particular began communicating in symbols, carving Drakari runes into the floors, then burning them into light. One message was clear. We remember. Ezra read the symbols every night. And every night, he heard Sarinthra's voice in his dreams. Protect them. Lead them. He would. He had to. One morning, while calibrating Ember's flight armor, Kara approached him with a report. Scouts found something in the outer ring, she said. Ezra looked up. What kind of something? Kara's expression was grim. A monolith. Old. Buried beneath a gas moon. It's emitting Ashborn frequencies. But not just theirs. It's mixed with something else. Ezra's brow furrowed. Something else? Kara nodded. Forgebound tech. But rewritten. Encrypted in a language none of our codices recognize. Ezra turned slowly toward the viewport, watching Ember fly in circles outside, trailing fire. You think the Ashborn were just a front? Kara exhaled. I think they were pawns. Ezra's jaw tightened. So it's not over. No, Kara said. It's just beginning. Ezra smiled. Good. He turned to the cubs assembling in the hangar. Let them come. Time passed. Not like a river, but like fire across dry grass. Fast and unrelenting. Ezra Holt's name spread across systems like a spark to gunpowder. First in rumors, then in whispers, then in official alerts and classified files locked inside corporate databanks and military archives that glitched every time his face came up on screen. Some called him the last Flame Rider, others the Ember General, but most didn't call him anything at all, because most didn't believe he was real, because real men didn't walk into the heart of a forge station and burn it from the inside out. Real men didn't bond with dragonkind and return alive. Real men didn't start another war with nothing but myth, memory, and cubs barely out of the nest. And yet, here he was, alive, and building something no one expected. The Ember Accord, signed not in polished government halls or sterile domes, but in a scorched crater on a reborn world, surrounded by cubs, humans, and exiled Drakari survivors. A treaty, a warning, a promise. Humanity and flame, together again. Kara stood beside him when it was signed. Her armor gleamed with streaks of red and silver, her new cybernetic eye glowing brighter than the last. Beside her, Ember, now larger, now armored, now marked with glyphs of her queen mother, let out a low growl that echoed across the plains. Thousands came, dragons in all colors and sizes. Humans, battered but unbroken. Aliens who'd once hunted the flame, but now knelt before it. Even Lyra Ven's fleet joined in full force, pledging neutrality no more. Their ships now bore the mark of the Ember Accord, a phoenix rising from a dragon's eye. But this wasn't the end of war. It was the beginning of reckoning. Because deep beyond the galaxy's edge, past where signals died and even light hesitated to go, something stirred. It began with a story. On a remote world where traders whispered tales by firelight, a young alien scribe recorded the testimony of a drifter, an old man missing half his limbs, with teeth of metal and a heart of circuits. The drifter spoke of a forge station that screamed when it died, of cubs that breathed starlight, of a human who walked willingly into death for a species not his own. The scribe asked what became of that human. The drifter smiled with cracked lips. They say he lit a fire that hasn't gone out. The story spread. It wasn't just rumor now. It was resistance. Across syndicate-controlled space, oppressed species began marking their homes with an ancient symbol rediscovered from Drakari memory banks. A broken sword, crossed by wings. They called themselves the Ashbreakers. And their battle cry? Human, don't stop. Ezra felt the change before the first embassy ships arrived. Before the outer world sent envoys wrapped in too much protocol and too little honesty. Before the children of the flame, Ember's clutch, took flight into different quadrants, serving as guardians and messengers and living warnings. He felt it in the way the cubs looked at him now. Not as a broken veteran, not as a caretaker, but as a leader, and maybe someday as a legend. He hated that word. Legends were for the dead, and he was very much alive. Kara ran the operations now. She coordinated supply lines, trained recruits, and sometimes vanished for weeks, tracking rogue, forge-bound splinters that hadn't accepted the Ashborn's fall. Lyra Ven had become a reluctant queen. Her neutral fleet now turned into the Accord's enforcement arm. And Ember? Ember had grown. Her wingspan now matched full Drakari war dragons. Her flames were blue-hot, ancient. Her mind? Sharp. She had begun speaking, not just in roars or symbols, but in words. Few. Clear, purposeful. She called Ezra father, not by blood, but by bond. And one day, when a transmission reached them from a dying relay station in the Andarii Rift, a signal encoded in Ashborn cipher, but warped by something older, she was the one who answered it. She listened. Then she turned to Ezra. They're calling us. Who? He asked. Ember's eyes flickered. The ones who sleep in the deep dark. The ones who made the first fire. Ezra stood slowly. The first flame? He whispered. Ember nodded. They're waking. He looked to Kara, who was already scanning star charts, preparing for a journey deeper than they'd ever dared go. You know what this means? She asked him. Ezra nodded. History's starting over. In time, statues were raised, not of Ezra, but of the Accord. Carved in alloy and obsidian, they depicted a human and a dragon, back to back, looking skyward. Beneath them, the phrase that would outlive even memory: burn together, or die alone. Children in fringe colonies would carve it into the sides of scrap ships. Soldiers painted it on helmets. And on one world, once syndicate run, now free, a young girl took her first flight on the back of a dragon not born, but reborn through flame and loss and war. She was told the story of the old human, of the cubs that had once surrounded him, of how he had refused to abandon them, of how that moment, that choice, had changed the stars. Decades later, in a quiet sector far from Akor, a vessel drifted past an ancient buoy. Its signal was weak, buried under static and age. But a fragment survived. A voice. Crackling. Human. Tired. Unbroken. If anyone's listening, we're still out here. Still burning. And we're not done yet. The universe thought it had witnessed the last of humanity's defiance. But somewhere, on a distant world, a small light flickered. A signal. A voice. A challenge. And the stars braced for what was coming next.